Have you ever wondered why, despite trying every suggestion out there, true healing with autoimmune disease still feels out of reach? Are you tired of hearing just do yoga or try meditation as if there's a magic fix for your chronic illness? Well, what if I told you there are science backed practices that can actually help you manage your symptoms, calm your nervous system, and reclaim a sense of control, even when there's no cure? If that sounds like you, you're not alone. So many of us struggle with the frustration of well meaning advice, the grief of lost expectations, and the daily challenge of living with autoimmune disease. Welcome back to the Health Bridge podcast. I'm Holly B, and I'm a lupus and energy expert. Through my Health Bridge protocol, I help women with lupus or other autoimmune conditions go from flared, fatigued, and burned out to a calm, stable, and lit up with life again. Today, I am joined by Roxanne Lerner, a certified yoga teacher and holistic health coach who's been living with lupus for 14 years. We're diving into myths and realities of yoga for chronic illness, the power of nervous system regulation, and how to build a healing toolkit that actually works for you. By the end of this episode, you will know how to start simple, effective practices that support your body and mind, no matter where you are at in your journey. So stick around because we're answering the question, can yoga and mindfulness really make a difference for women living with autoimmune disease? Now, before we dive in, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. It makes a world of a difference in getting this podcast out further. And the more people that can listen to this podcast, the more people we can empower on their autoimmune journey. Thanks so much for doing that. And now let's dive into this episode. Roxanne, thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy to finally have you on. We've been getting to know each other a little bit through another group that we've been a part of. And I've been following you on Instagram for a while, and I just absolutely love what you're doing. So, welcome. I'm excited for our conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for asking me.
So, you do kind of all kinds of different nutritional help, mindset work, nervous system regulation, specifically for the chronic illness community. And this is because you yourself have lupus. What I really want to start with is just one of the myths around yoga, because I don't know about you, but I've seen in so many different lupus support groups on Facebook, things like that, where people are getting so upset with somebody that suggests yoga to them as a method of helping them through their illness. And it's like, oh, yeah, sure, yoga is going to help my lupus or going to cure me. And it's like, no, that's not what we're saying. But it can be very helpful and beneficial to you. So I'd love for you to speak to that and just get that off the table right off the bat.
Sure, absolutely. And I noticed the same thing for so many years. I've been a yoga teacher for 10 years this month, actually. And it wasn't until the beginning of 2025 that I sort of came out on Instagram to debunk the myth. And I think I was waiting to see if I could understand why the chronic illness community would, lupus community was having so much disdain for yoga. I was like, what is it? Why is everybody posting these memes and really, sort of hating on yoga? What is it? Why? What is this about? And then I started to see that people had disdain for yoga or meditation, mindfulness, breathwork, all the things I teach, these mindfulness practices, because when somebody would suggest it, it was with this insinuation that it could cure you. And people are tired of suggestions that are unrealistic. We know there's no cure for lupus. And yoga is not a cure for lupus because there is no actual cure yet. But yoga is a science-backed practice. There's a ton of research now behind yoga and why it helps with chronic illness, autoimmune diseases, and lupus, which is an autoimmune disease, as we know. And it really goes back to this idea that when you start to calm your nervous system, when you regulate your nervous system using yoga as a practice, which is the act of pairing movement with breath work. That's how I define yoga. So when you're doing that, you're starting to lower your cortisol levels, which are your stress hormones. And when your cortisol levels go down, inflammation goes down. And we know lupus is an inflammatory disease. So from there, symptoms can start to improve. And I just had such a profound experience when I started to learn yoga and meditation and breath work and the science behind it. It really gave me this insight into the why. And I'm not a sciencey person, but I was fortunate enough to learn all of this from a neuroscientist who I worked for, who encouraged me to take our yoga teacher training. And so I took a leap of faith. I was still pretty sick at the time. This was 2015. And after, understanding this year what people were so angry about, I decided, maybe it's time to speak up and just, educate people and share this information and start teaching our community. Prior to that, I've been teaching, but it was focused towards moms or teachers, kids in school. And I decided, it was time. I was asked to be on another podcast, first podcast I was ever on at the beginning of the year. And I decided, okay, it's meant to be. Now's the time. And so that's what I've been doing, I guess, since January. you know,
I
Having the
love that.
opportunity to just share the why behind it. And also, the placebo effect is real too. So if you go into this thinking it can help you, it's the mindset shift. You talk so much about mindset. If you go into, and I'm not just talking about yoga, anything with the belief and the faith that it can help you, that also is great for your nervous system. That is very high vibe where stress, anxiety, which can lead to depression, is just low level energy. And we know that also impacts our energy. We all deal with a lot of fatigue. So all of these things can really boost your mood, help your nervous system. And I think when people try it and they feel that shift, it's like they just need that one moment where they have a sense of relief. You start to crave that feeling. There is a lot to say about yoga, but yes, it's not a cure, but it can help.
Thank you for setting the record straight. I totally agree. I think when people first are diagnosed or they're really going through the thick of it, they're really in the middle of their symptoms. They're told there's no cure and they are very defensive. They're very defensive about that because I think as somebody with a chronic illness, when you are trying to explain your situation to somebody who hasn't had that experience for them, they want to help. So they're trying to say, well, what about this? And have you tried that? And, maybe if you ate this way, or maybe if you did yoga, or maybe if you tried some breath work, it'll really help. And when you're in that defensive mode, receiving that information, it can feel like somebody thinks they're smarter than you. You just haven't figured it out, this little magic trick yet to automatically get rid of all of your symptoms, and you become defensive and it's easy to argue for your limitations within that illness. And so I think that goes along with everything that you said of why people get so upset when somebody suggests yoga to them. But what you're saying is it brings in this beautiful way of regulating the nervous system through the movement, which movement is essential for health. And it brings in the breath, it brings in the mindset. And scientifically, like you're saying, we know that these things make cellular shifts within the body. And so that's when I started learning about mindset and neuroplasticity and how we can change our thoughts and we can change the patterns of our thinking and therefore shift the patterns in our life. That was mind blowing to me. I had never heard that concept before. And so bringing in a practice like yoga is a tool in how to shift that because it's not just physical movement, it is bringing in that neuroplasticity, which again filters out to all of the body systems.
Exactly. When I learned that meditation changes our brains, it was like, oh my God, and when you start to feel the difference, it's just like this newfound hope, but you have to be open-minded to trying these things. And like you said, people are well-meaning. They have good intentions. And people are very dismissive because they get defensive. And I totally understand that. And that's why I wanted to be the one to speak to our community because I get all of it. And I grew up with a lot of anxiety, and we know stress is like what puts everything over the edge. There's so many things that have to line up before you actually get sick. But, stress to me is like how the water overflowed in the bathtub. We know there's a genetic component, environmental, the stress and anxiety piece, food sensitivities. There's just so many factors. So if we follow the research and understand how stress is one of those main triggers, why wouldn't we want to try something that can walk all of this back? And actually practicing yoga, breath work, meditation, which I put under the umbrella of mindfulness, which is really living in the moment. So mindfulness meditation is when you connect with your breath and you are focusing on your breath and you're truly living in the moment. You're quieting your thinking mind. You're tuning inward. You're really tapping into your intuition. That is the best place to start to figure out and understand what your triggers are. So when you're listening to all the noise, and there's so much noise, everyone thinks they know best. I'm not saying I know best. You know best, but I can help you tune inwards and figure it out. That's the point, because if we are stressed and anxious, it's very hard to think clearly. It's hard to see your lifestyle clearly. It's hard to make changes. It's like impossible to make changes. But what I learned is that I was sensitive to gluten. That was a big trigger. Oh, I'm photosensitive. I was paying attention to my life and I was reading a lot. And you have to really educate yourself. So finding great books, great teachers. Obviously now we have podcasts. Oh, I was diagnosed almost 15 years ago. So I was buying books on Amazon, and I just step by step started to figure out what was going on. But every day I was establishing a consistent yoga and meditation practice. And I started to understand why this was actually helping when I met a neuroscientist. So it really all started to come together. And then 5 years ago, my blood work was normal and it stayed normal, which does not mean I don't have flares or symptoms. But that was a big indicator to me that the lower my stress is, the better I'm going to feel. And we know that blood work doesn't tell the whole story. But that was really important. And that has been influential in me wanting to share these practices and the science behind it.
Can you tell us what starting a practice like this might look like for somebody who has heard of yoga, maybe has even done yoga, but hasn't had it incorporated into their life, as a legitimate practice? Like, how did you start? And what might that look like for someone both who is maybe on the mild end of the chronic illness symptoms versus somebody that's really experiencing hardcore flares?
Sure. Well, even for me, I was always, until I was 27, I never had health issues. I was an athlete, I was a competitive cheerleader, I was working many hours when I got sick. And I was introduced to a meditation teacher, just like we're talking about, somebody suggested meditation and I was open to it. And so I started to listen to guided meditations. And that was a little bit of a gateway. And I decided I'd always loved yoga. Obviously, I could not take yoga class at the time, but I found a private yoga teacher and I would see her twice a week and I would literally lay on a yoga mat. I mean, I don't know how much I was even moving, but I was laying there breathing. I was being supported. Other people's energy can really, people, as a yoga teacher, holding space for people. This teacher was really supporting me and encouraging me and just letting me feel my feelings, which is another big piece of the healing process because it was traumatic. I mean, at that point I couldn't work. I could barely leave my apartment, but I'd always loved to move. So I think intuitively I knew I needed to get myself up and out. And somehow I ended up with this great yoga teacher. And so from there, other pieces of the puzzle started to come together, my treatment plan and, rebuilding, like the rebuilding phase. And so my practice turned into Pilates and more of a flow yoga. And then I started to add in some weights. It was a lot of trial and error. And I couldn't do what I'd been used to doing. And so my mind was playing tricks on me because everything felt like a failure. But then I'd go back to the breath work and sit with my feelings. And slowly I began to accept what had happened, what was happening, and realize I needed to adjust my my expectations of myself and believe that I could heal. I mean, my affirmation from day one was for my mantras, thank you for my healing. That came from something I was reading and it just stuck with me. So it was the meditation, the mantras, the introduction to yoga in a new way, the breath work. And slowly I started to feel stronger, have more energy. But, for anyone starting a practice, the most important thing is consistency. And you don't need a lot of space. That's the beauty of yoga. If you have a towel and a little corner where you live, you can set that up. And I always say, start with your breath. Start by learning really how to take deep, full inhales and exhales because that is what physiologically is calming your nervous system. And I always say to people, if you yawn, if your belly rumbles, if you feel a wave of relief, if you start to cry, this is all a release. This means you are shifting from fight or flight, which we are living in with chronic illness, every single one of us, into the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest, and giving yourself that little bit of time. It changes everything. So you start where you are. You give yourself the time and space to breathe. And then we bring in the movements, the gentle stretches. Stretching and breathing supports your circulation. So not just your nervous system, your circulation. Obviously, we talked about inflammation. A lot of us have digestive issues. Certain yoga poses help with digestion, lymphatic, like the list goes, all the systems of the body are supported. But you start where you are. There's so much on the internet now, and I teach it, virtually. I love just helping people start a practice. And I always say, take one or two things from class and bring that into your daily life off the mat. Because what you do off your mat or in your daily life is more important than the class. But you're learning in the class, but being consistent with yourself is where the changes really happen. And again, you don't need 60 minutes a day. I mean, my practice could be 10 minutes and very gentle, but always pretty effective.
I used to love working out. This is pre chronic fatigue, pre mono, pre chronic fatigue. So my early 20s, I loved working out. I loved going to the gym. Then I got mono, which triggered the chronic fatigue. And I was just for years and years and years stuck in the cycle of I'm feeling good. I'm going to get back to working out again. I try to go back to what I used to do. Within 2 to 3 weeks, I'd be knocked down for a month or two. And then I'd be like, okay, well, I think I'm feeling better. I'm going to try it again, and I'd keep doing this to myself over and over. And what I finally had to do was let go of what I thought I should be able to do. And I found yoga on YouTube, Yoga with Cassandra. She's my girl. I found her right when she was doing this 30-day yoga challenge, 10-minute practices. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so 10 minutes a day. And I just committed to that. And after the challenge was done, I might skip a day here and there, but I basically got it slowly into my routine. And that's my non-negotiable is I get up, I have my water, my electrolytes, supplements if I need them, and then I put my yoga mat down. Because if I don't do it right then, for me, it's not going to happen. So I have to get that done first thing every single day. I do it 7 days a week, most weeks, and I love it. And I don't feel right without it. And then I'll add to that during the day when I can. I might do another short yoga session, or sometimes I'll do a longer 30 or 40-minute yoga session, or sometimes I'll go for a long walk. I incorporate other things, but that was how I finally got it in. And that was just with 10 minutes a day. So going back to starting with where you're at, that's where I was at. And I still feel proud of myself for doing 10 minutes a day if that's all I have. That was me time, you know?
Yeah,
That
you
was me
should be
time.
proud. You should be so proud. This is all true self-care. And like you said, part of that is accepting that we may not be able to do everything we once did pre-lupus, and really being okay with that. Took a long time for me, but I can truly say I fully accept what's happened. And that just gives me so much more joy in my life. Being okay, not always fighting what happened. I can't run, not that I ever loved running. Exercise intolerance, when you have chronic fatigue, it's a tricky place. Because like you said, you feel great. You do something that exerts a lot of energy. You're not down for a month. Like, that's real. And anyone with chronic fatigue understands that. We are not working with normal, typical energy. Probably my biggest challenge still, chronic fatigue, for sure. So learning how to manage our energy, work with ourselves, and slowly over time, and I think with the acceptance piece, we can do more of what we once did. Maybe not everything, but the challenge is being okay with that. And I find that mindfulness practices really, truly help us get out of our own way. We have to get out of our own way. And you have to find the right tools for you. And 10 minutes of yoga or breath work is beautiful. It's proving that you don't need a lot of time to take care of yourself. And I'm just like you. If I don't do this first thing in the morning, it doesn't get done. But I do it. I've literally kept track of my workouts or my yoga sessions for 15 years because I see it written down and it keeps me accountable. And it feels good to know that I'm taking care of myself in this way. Everybody in my house knows, don't come into the basement. That's where my yoga studio is. That's where I teach. That's where I practice. Leave mommy alone, That's it. This is what I need to do to take care of myself. And like you said, I feel off without it. And I can't be the best wife, mother, yoga teacher if I'm not doing that. And I really advocate for putting yourself first when you have lupus. There's no shame. I don't believe in mom guilt. This is like putting your oxygen mask on first. Everybody around you benefits. It's been so hard on my family, but everyone has rallied. And I think we're stronger because of it. I know, what my husband and I have gone through, we weren't married when I got sick, but he stuck by me. And like our marriage is so strong, our bond, because we've sort of been to hell and back. So anything else that happens in our lives, we know we can handle. And I really believe my practice is the foundational piece of that. I can't look to him to get me better. Yes, my rheumatologist is great. I have a great treatment plan. And it's changed over the years as I've gotten healthier. And I need all these people and these things. But it's really within us to make the changes that become consistent. And, what I love to do is support people, hold them accountable. Sometimes I needed that yoga teacher to get me out of my apartment and do the 30 minutes of yoga. Sometimes we just need someone else. I mean, the great thing about the internet is we meet other lupus warriors and we learn so much from them, what's worked for them. You can be dismissive and defensive, but where's that going to get you? And it doesn't hurt to try things. That's really what I've learned too.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in here and interrupt the program for just a hot minute. You know that I'm so passionate about this podcast, but what I'm also really passionate about is helping women with lupus minimize their symptoms, boost their energy so that they can indulge in life again. So if you are a woman who is struggling with lupus, who is sick and tired of being sick and tired, who's struggling to manage your flares, if you're finding that your lupus symptoms are just really getting in the way of you being able to live your life the way you want to, I feel you. I've been there myself and I felt the same way. And what I've found is that there are a certain set of health fundamentals that once applied, will support you in your foundational health. They will support you in building and maintaining that energy, minimizing flares, and allowing you to, again, indulge in life and follow your passions. So, if that is something that you are interested in creating for yourself, let's jump on a call together. I will walk you through the process that I use with my clients to get them from sick and tired to strong foundation of health by implementing my Health Bridge protocol. If this is something you're interested in chatting more about, I would love to talk to you. Apply for a free clarity call with me, and I look forward to getting to know you soon. And now back to the episode. I agree completely. Utilize the community around you. Learn to seek out help. Learn to ask for help when you need it. You have to designate when you can't do all the things mom and wife is, expected to do. You have to say, help me with the laundry, do the dishes. Mom needs extra rest time today. And I think that's a huge part of it is like advocating for ourselves, like you said. And I think for so many of us that end up in the chronic health space, we've not been good at doing that throughout our life. And it sort of accumulates into this scenario where learning to do that is essential for our health. Right. Absolutely essential. And I like that you pointed out that you needed accountability. Like you needed that outside source with that yoga teacher. And I've felt that same way about coaches that I've worked with. I need outside accountability because my monkey brain, my monkey mind is going to talk me out of a lot of shit that I need to do. And when you have that accountability person, it's a lot harder for you to give in to the monkey mind. And it helps you, I think it's helped me in creating boundaries when I work with someone who can see through my little white lies of what I'm saying, what I'm doing versus what I'm actually doing. Having a good coach or a good friend or support, in some aspect of your life can really call you on your BS. And we need that in our healing journey too.
Yeah.
One thing to think, oh, I'm drinking enough water today, but have you really checked how much water you're drinking? And maybe you're not drinking as much as you think you are, or maybe you're not being as consistent with eating a whole foods based diet as you think you are because, well, there was a holiday, so you had some extra treats, and then somebody brought something to the office, so you have some extra treats, and it's like those little things that add up, and having somebody to help kind of keep us accountable is so, so important on our healing journey.
Yeah. And I also think we have to realize that it's the small changes that lead to the big differences. It is the extra water. It is figuring out your food sensitivities and paying close attention to diet. I had a functional nutritionist or functional doctor. I had GI, any kind of Eastern or Western type of provider or practitioner. I seek out help from everybody to help me figure out what's causing the inflammation and what can I do to walk it back. And when I can't do this myself, I knew I could lean on them for support to get me through it. And from all those people, I've taken so much amazing information and knowledge. And then I went back to school to become a holistic health coach because I was like, oh, I have all this knowledge. Let's continue. It'll help me. It'll help other warriors in the future who want to work with me. It takes, and it's a lot of work. Like, it really is a lot of work, but you have to be bring in that self-love piece. You are worth it, which is hard when you get sick with a chronic illness, sort of your confidence, your self-love, everything you once knew about yourself tends to get stripped away. And I say it's rebuilding, but coming out the other end and really finding the silver linings now, I look back and I say it was all worth it. Wasn't easy. None of this is easy. It's still not easy. I would never call this an easy life, but it gets better. You have to believe you can get better. You have to lean on other people, meet other lupus warriors, try different things. And then I came out the other side so grateful. It's like with my husband, we can get through anything. My children are little empaths. They understand things in a completely different way because they know, my struggles. Not everything, but I've explained it to them in a child appropriate way. And I think it has brought my family closer. I think that I live with so much less stress and anxiety than I ever would have. And that to me is a huge silver lining, just it makes you appreciate a lot more than you may have.
I'd love to talk about the anxiety piece because you mentioned that you grew up with a lot of anxiety. How I know obviously through yoga, you're doing the breath work, you're doing the mindfulness aspect, but can you tease out that piece a little bit more as to really getting into the regulation of the nervous system, how anxiety affects the nervous system, and then why it's so important for us to learn how to counterbalance that and bring in that mindfulness aspect, bring in the breath work, tone down that vagal nerve so that the anxiety doesn't end up triggering what we might be pre-genetically disposed to, right?
Yeah. So when you are living in a heightened state, first of all, you may not even realize, a lot of us, and I had the monkey mind too when I was learning meditation. I could not stop thinking, ruminating. You're living in this fight or flight state. And for me, it took getting sick to realize how high my stress levels were. I mean, I think I knew, but I didn't realize the extent. So when you're stressed and anxious, first of all, you're taxing your adrenals. Stress and anxiety fuel inflammation. So your body is becoming systemically inflamed and you're running off cortisol, stress hormone. And so when you start to learn mindfulness practices like breath work, breath work physiologically changing you on a cellular level. You are, like I said, lowering your cortisol levels, your stress hormones. So you're able to quiet your mind. You're able to live in the moment. And sometimes when you're in the moment, you realize nothing is actually wrong. These are patterns, these are thought patterns. And you get used to that. The things you ruminate about, they're not happening in the present moment. They're either happening in the past or you're worrying about the future. And so continuing to practice being in the moment, using breath work and calming your nervous system. Because when you're stressed, your nervous system is upregulated. And that just might be your baseline. That was my baseline. So I started learning these practices and then understanding the science. And I was like, yes, this makes sense. I literally feel different. And so committing to doing this every single day, not only does it lower your stress hormones and inflammation, but you start to realize actually nothing's wrong right now. I've been living in the past or in the future. In the present moment, nothing is wrong. And that is like a huge awakening, So you're really recognizing your thought patterns and you're able to take a break from thinking. You start to notice what's going on in your body. Oh, I have joint pain. I didn't even realize it was in my hands because I'm just living in my head. So once I realized just how bad my pain was, and actually lowering your cortisol level helps with chronic pain, all those pieces start to add up. And you start to just live in a totally new and different way. And that has been a beautiful thing for me.
And for somebody that hasn't done breath work before or any of these other mindfulness techniques, where would you suggest they start?
Well, you can book a session with me. You can
Perfect.
check out my Instagram. I post a lot of tutorials. It can be as simple as taking a deep breath in through your nose. You feel your belly expand, and then you exhale out through your mouth. Your belly contracts. Do this for 30 seconds every day and start to notice if you feel different. I would say, read about the benefits of breath work. Start to understand what I'm saying here. There are a lot of scientists and other people who can explain it more in depth. I like to keep it pretty basic because that's how I really understand it best or can explain it best. But there's so much great information out there. There's so many books that I recommend that can teach you the why. And I think sometimes people really want to know why before they start. They have to read something before they do it. So seek out that education, seek out the experts. I love to teach people simple, effective breathwork practices. And it doesn't take long to do it. So it's easy to be consistent.
And that's something that you can work into your day, so easily. If you're at work, you can take a bathroom break and just literally sit on the toilet for an extra minute just to have space to breathe.
Where they close their door and they give themselves just a few minutes. I mean, my husband who gives presentations, I know before he goes on stage, he practices breath work and the people around you benefit. That's the beauty of it. I do practices with my son every night before he goes to bed, and he asks for it because he feels different when he does it. As a 6-year-old, he knows he feels different. And so any age, anywhere, anytime, nobody will know. I always say if you're on the road and you're starting to feel road rage, don't close your eyes when you're driving, but you can practice these inhale, exhale. You'll feel that wave of relief. That's when you know your nervous system's quiet. And when you're in that place, I will always recommend add in a mantra, add in something, I'm safe. These practices help us feel safe and trust our bodies, which many of us at the time feel as if our bodies betrayed us. All these negative feelings about our bodies. We have to undo that pattern of thought and start to appreciate. This is where a gratitude practice comes in, which changes our neural pathways. I am grateful for something small every day. You got to work at it. And it's just really being consistent, I would say, is the most important aspect. So, it can help you when you're driving home from work, can help you I had insomnia for 10 years, and different practices at different times help me sleep through the night. These are, again, science-backed practices.
You can't necessarily think your way out of it, but you can train your way out of it, right?
Yes.
Yes.
With the
And
right
gratitude, yes. And gratitude was one of the biggest things that I started with. Wake up in the morning before your feet hit the ground, immediately focus on something you're grateful for, and have a mantra or something ready to focus on. Because as someone with chronic illness knows, you often wake up and you immediately do a body scan and you're like, what hurts today? How am I feeling? Am I still tired? And you're like already deciding how your day is going to go based on how you feel at that exact moment when you wake up. And so if we can train our mind to focus on something that we're grateful for, something that puts us in a state of awe, which fills our heart space, if we can train ourselves to do that first, it gets us more in that present moment and it creates coherence in the body. It helps with that cellular communication. It helps with the mindset. And then it's easier for us to reframe things throughout the day. So a reframe might be, instead of waking up and saying, oh, I feel like crap, might be like, I'm I'm in a healing phase. Just a small tweak. You're not going to wake up and if you physically feel like crap, you're not going to be able to believe I am healthy and vibrant, right? Like it doesn't make sense to your body, to your nervous system to make that big of a leap. So just saying I'm in a healing phase means maybe you don't feel 100%, but you are healing and it's just a phase. And that relaxes the nervous system just a little bit. So it's not like, oh my God, this is a immediate emergency. It's like, okay, we can work through this. So
right.
just those subtle shifts and doing that first thing in the morning, like I said, as soon as you wake up, because my monkey mind just wants to spiral immediately with all the to-do lists, everything that's wrong with me, like I'm still training myself out of that.
Probably negativity bias.
Yeah,
Really
exactly.
does focus on the negatives. We have to train it to
Yep.
focus on positives, which is also why I used to love to write these things down in the morning, these positive affirmations. Start
Yes.
keep training your brain. And also what I found is that allowed me not to have one bad day bleed into the next. Because with chronic illness, it's chronic, especially in the beginning when you're just in such a terrible state. It's easy to think, okay, of course I'm going to feel like this tomorrow. But again, that's not living in the moment. You might not feel as bad tomorrow, but you're going to make yourself feel worse if you believe that you're going to have the same exact symptoms and another bad day. We know with lupus, that's really not always true. We can't always predict how we're going to feel, which means you could wake up and have a pretty good day. And that was something that I think really helped me a lot too, because we can go for long stretches in a flare. But let's see how we can make the best of it. Let's not believe it's going to be terrible for the next 6 months. We have to really live day to day.
And then having the tools in place, right? To when you experience that flare or when you experience something in your life that pops up out of, unexpectedly, that throws us off course mentally and or physically, having the tools in place that you can rely on without having to seek something new. You already have the tools, you have the breath work, you have the mindset, you know your nutrition needs, you know how important rest is. You have to pull on all of those things to get yourself through it. Even say you're not in a terrible state at the moment, health wise, you're not flaring, maybe you're in remission, you're doing relatively good overall. Now would be an excellent time to start learning those tools and putting all those tools in your toolbox if you haven't already, because if and when a flare happens or something happens in your life, you have those things immediately to draw on.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, for years, I could not accept a flare. I couldn't. I was fighting it, and I would be depressed, if I went a long time and I felt fine, and then all of a sudden I get too much sun and I'm in a flare. It really messed with my head. Now I'm in a place where, and setbacks, because we think of it as being set back. You're taken out of your life. You can't get out of bed, right? We have to learn to accept, and we can call it different things. In my mind, it was a setback. You have to accept. It again kind of goes back to the acceptance piece for me. Okay, I have lupus. Lupus flares are going to happen. I do the best I can, stay out of the sun because I'm incredibly photosensitive. And the flare happened. Okay, how can I make the best of it? And that gives your nervous system a break. And maybe the flare will be shortened because you're okay with it. And, that takes a lot of work, obviously. But between that, asking for help, not feeling guilty saying no, which many people, I actually don't have that problem.
One of the lucky few.
I can bear it, but in a way, I feel really lucky. It's just not that I don't think anyone in my family is selfish, but everyone knew it was taught each other it's okay to say no to things. So I actually don't feel bad saying no. I think that's helped me. But I think if you're a yes person, a lot of people call themselves people pleasers. Being okay saying no, that just makes it so much easier on yourself. And then when you feel good, of course, say yes. Because we want to be able to enjoy doing things. Lupus can take away a lot of those opportunities. It took away late nights with friends when I was in my 20s. I lost those friends. It took away a career I thought I'd always had, doing fundraising and events. Nope, couldn't do that. Everything had to be now on a smaller scale. Coming to terms with that, for me, took learning from a therapist what grief is and noticing my triggers when I felt that stabbing in my heart, being with friends who were talking about their careers and their promotions. And I was like, oh, this is what's taken from me. I had to understand that was grief. And grief is the loss of what we thought was going to be. It doesn't just happen when someone dies. And I think that too was a game changer in the last few years, understanding grief, triggers, and then, making new friends, getting involved with the lupus community. Those are things that fill me up. When I feel well, going out for a late dinner, always saying yes to things, and most of the time now being able to go. But, I know what it's like to miss everything for many years. It's heartbreaking. But I always want people to understand that if you're in that place, that's not forever. It doesn't have to be the forever of your story. And then, again, explaining these tools that I think are incredibly helpful.
That's so helpful that you mentioned that about your experience of like I've missed out on things. I've grieved things. I actually did a whole podcast with someone about grief and about grieving the life you thought you were going to have when you end up with a chronic illness. And it is part of the process, but I'd like to again do a mindset shift, like a reframe around that. If that's not something that somebody's going through, is like just try to be open minded to the idea that perhaps there is another path forward. And just because it's not the one that you had initially been working towards and assumed and visualized for yourself, maybe just maybe this could open the door to something so much more for you, so much more fulfilling, so much more nourishing. And, just try to sit with that idea when you have those waves of grief because, I still grieve not going to the gym all the time.
Oh,
I wish I
yeah.
could still be that person. I visualize myself as somebody that's super fit, but that's just not my path. I still expect to be able to get stronger and more physically fit, but sometimes we just have to let go of what our old expectations were and be open to the beauty that can come through this completely different door that we have had to walk through based on our illness.
I totally agree.
Roxanne, this has been a great conversation. I'm so happy that you were able to join me. Where can everybody find you?
I am most active on Instagram at Oral Wellness DC. My website is roxannelerner.com. I have a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that I'm working towards. We have group classes this fall. I'm teaching some free live classes coming up. I'll share the dates. I see this now as my silver lining. I may not be doing big fundraising and events, but teaching, they're individual events, they're smaller events. So I sort of look at what I'm doing, bringing all of those skills that I've cultivated to the lupus community. And it's just wonderful getting to meet everyone, including you, Holly. I followed you for a long time, way before I knew you, and I was always so impressed with everything you shared. And I was just now that as a friend, I'm really proud of you. It cannot be easy hosting a podcast, and you show up so beautifully for this community. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's been 100% my pleasure. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to see how we continue to work together in the future because I know that we're going to be entwined in this community for sure. So thank you, Roxanne. Thank you so much to Roxanne Lerner for sharing her wisdom, experience, and compassion with all of us. I really hope this conversation leaves you feeling really more empowered to take those small, consistent steps towards greater health and self acceptance. Whether that's a breath or a gentle stretch or a mindset shift, it all makes such a big difference. So remember, you don't have to navigate this journey alone. Just check the show notes for resources or reach out if you're ready for more personalized support. But until next time, be gentle with yourself, trust your process, and keep building your bridge back to health. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Health Bridge Podcast.